Our discussion today is on development journalism, which is BJL2103. My name is Robert Muriuki. We are going to begin with definitions of development. We want to define what development is according to scholars. And Rogers defined development as a widely participatory process of social change in a society. And he said that development is intended to bring social and material advancement to a society. And this would include greater inequality, freedom, and other valued qualities for the majority of people. This is what Rogers says about development. Inayatullah defines development as change towards patterns of society that allows better realization of human values, to allow a society greater control over its environment and over its political destiny. And this will enable individuals to gain increased control over themselves. Another definition is by Roger Everett, who says that development is an eminent communication. Roger Everett is a famous communicator, and he defines development as a purposeful change to the world and the kind of social and economic system that the country decides it wants. We want to look at the meaning of communication. And communication is from a Latin word, communis, which means common or shared understanding. And communication, therefore, can be said to be purposeful effort to establish commonness between a source and a receiver. And this we're quoting Schramm, 1965. Schramm also says that whatever is being shared could be associated with knowledge, experience, thoughts, ideas, suggestions, opinions, or feelings. According to Barron, he defines communication as the process of creating shared meaning. And this is because participants in communication encounter, in any communication encounter, are interested in obtaining messages that are understandable. Now we define development communication, and we quote Andrew Moemka, who defines development communication as the art and science of human communication applied to the speedy transformation of a country. This is economically, through growth, modernization, or industrialization. And he also talks about the mass of its people. The mass of the people should attain self-actualization, fulfillment of human potential, get greater social justice, and so on, through identification and utilization of appropriate expertise in development process that seeks to increase participation in development. And therefore, we can say that development is the use of communication to promote development. And Andrew Moemuka has continued to define development communication as the application of the process of communication to the development process. And communication involves the deployment of the principles and practices of exchange of ideas to development objectives. He says that the development of the process of development communication creates a conducive atmosphere of a healthy dialogue that facilitates the enablement of the balance in socio-economic advancement between physical output and human relationships. We want to define what is non-development communication so that we can separate development communication from other forms of communication. And we are told that non-development communication is what development communication is not. And the difference is that development communication and non-development communication is based on the nature, also the sources, messages, channels, how it is used, the audience, and its overall objectives. Non-development communication is non-purposive. It's also communication for the sake of communication, unlike development communication, as we have seen, which is purposeful. Non-development communication is also characterized by the following characteristics, and these are that it has no clearly defined objective to achieve in its audience. It is also not planned. It's not also planned like development communication. And the other characteristic is that it relies on sources that may be not directly involved in development. But for development communication, it only relies on sources that are directly involved in communication. The other characteristic of non-development communication is that its messages are heavily loaded with entertainment and sensational news, such as war, disasters, crimes, and other crises. And then its presentation is fact-based and what is assumed as the needs of the audience. And the development communication, as another characteristic, is that it comprises of a homogeneous general public in whom it seeks to inject awareness, unlike development communication, which is specific to its audiences. We want to briefly look at the background of development communication. When we examine the existing literature on development communication, we see that the place of communication in the development process has long been recognized. And the theories and practices of development communication sprang from the many challenges and opportunities that faced development-oriented institutions. According to Lana, he says that mass media growth is one of the three phases of democratic political development. He ties development to the growth of media, of mass media, as one of the face of the democratic political development. And the other two are urbanization and also literacy. Yeah, those three faces, or those three facets, can be tied to the development of development communication, or the historical background in development communication, the growth of the media, urbanization, and also widespread literacy. Lana says that the mass media creates opportunity for empathy, which helped Western men to acquire skills that spell modernity. Clapper did not deal specifically with the effects of the media on development per se, but he looked at the impact of the mass media in general in the historical background of development communication. However, we cannot justifiably exclude development from such general impact, may it be individual, may it be socio-economic. Schramm, in 1964, gave what is classified as the best-known exposition of the relationship between the mass media and national development in the 1960s. And in the process, he listed 12 things which the mass media can do in the task of national development. And these 12 include widening of horizons, that the mass media widened the horizons of development, because now it could report in a wider area, rather than just focusing on a few areas. The mass media helps in widening the horizons, looking at development in a wider area geographically or other contexts. The other one is mass media helps to focus attention. It focuses attention on development projects, what's being done for development, what needs to be done, what is not done. That is focusing attention on development. The other one is raising aspirations. Yeah, raising aspirations of the people so that they are aware of development, so that they can appreciate what development is, or they can demand development. It's the aspirations that are raised by the media. The other thing the media does is create a climate for development. Because, for example, when the media exemplifies, gives examples of developments in different places, this creates a climate for development for the publics that are concerned. People can see other people, what other people are doing, and then they can feel they would like to be in similar situation. They can want to have that kind of development. So it creates a climate for development. And the other thing that the media can do is that it helps change strongly held attitudes or values. There are some attitudes that society can hold very dear, and they can be a detriment to development. And this, the media can help to change these strongly held attitudes or values. and that can pave a way for development, because some of the strongly held views and attitudes can hinder development. The other one is to feed the interpersonal channels, that people can talk to one another interpersonally, feeding those interpersonal channels. The other one is media can confer. It can confer status. Yeah, it can confer status on development project, can confer status on people concerned with development. The other one is it can broaden the policy dialogue. Yeah, that policies are very important in development, because it's through policy that development is actualized. So media can help in broadening the policy dialogue, maybe from quoting policy or from examining policy from other communities or from other areas. The other one is to enforce social norms. Yeah, this is also very important. The media can enforce social norms so that people can see what is the norm in society across many societies. The other one is help to form tastes, yeah, through exposing of development projects, of what development is, or what development is being done. Then those tastes can be formed, and people can aspire or can want to develop like what is being done by other people. And the other one, the other one is to affect attitudes that are lightly held and canalize stronger attitudes. Yeah, there are some attitudes that are just lightly held. People don't take them seriously. This, the media can help to, to change these light attitudes, what people take lightly, and give it more weight. And the other one is help substantially in all types of education and training. Yeah, because in development, it's important for people to be educated, to learn many things about development, and also be trained. And as a continuation to the historical background, is that the strong faith in communications power in development was shared by many political scientists in the 1960s. Many political scientists felt that there was power. Communication was very central to development. Two scholars here, Almond and Vaber, in 1963, for example, looked at communication as very essential in any political integration. And we know that if there is no political integration, development can be very difficult to come about. So these two scholars realized and opined that communication is very essential in political integration. Another scholar, Pai, also in the 1960s, 1963, thought the problem of political development is one of cultural diffusion and of adapting and adjusting old patterns of life to new demands. And this, he said, that since communication is the web of society, its flow, the flow of communication determines the direction and a place of dynamic social change. When people are exposed to communication, when they get to hear ideas from other areas or from other people, then they can be able to acquire, they can be able to have that or increase the pace of social development. That is according to Pi. Dush also saw communication as a prerequisite for successful political democracy. And as we saw, political democracy is very central to development, because there's participation, there is input, and when there is that political democracy, there's more openness, people are more free to think about development. And we can see that all these studies revolved around a conception of communication, which can be described as from the discredited magic bullet theory. Because the magic bullet theory had it that communication is very important, especially mass communication, and it gets to everybody in a similar way. So these theories that we have looked at seemed to agree that communication would be a panacea. Communication would be a heal-all, because it would get to everybody in a similar way. And they believed that just like the hypodermic needle theory saw mass media as affecting people the same, these people also thought that through the use of mass media, then development can be acquired in a similar way to all the people. These theories also discuss what communication can do, or the effect it can have on literacy, aspiration, empathy, attitudes, and so on. What they seem to forget is that they did not regard the cultural and socio-economic realities of the audiences that were receiving this communication, because according to them, communication, as far as communication is done, then development would be the result. But by the early 1970s, it was clear that these theories would not work. And it was seen that people, the majority of people, especially in the development countries, were not benefiting from this kind of development, what was called the capital-intensive industrialization programs, which they call development, because they thought development would trickle down, would be pushed from the developed world to the developing world through communication. But as progress, that is progress like we are seeing by the early 1960s, 70s, it was clear that this was not working. And Bill and Jusawala and Stewart and Streeton say that industrialization was causing large-scale migration from the rural areas, and technology was fostering greater dependency rather than self-reliance, and Western values and behavior were threatening indigenous cultures and social institutions. So this was a criticism of the earlier theories, that this industrialization, which was tied to development, was causing people to move away from the rural areas and migrate into urban areas. And technology was bringing greater dependency. You know, instead of people becoming self-reliant with the development, it was seen that they were getting dependent. It was fostering great dependency instead of giving people self-reliance. And there were also Western values and behavior that were injected, and these were threatening indigenous culture and social institutions, which are very central in a development environment. They also saw these theories as a simplistic approach to communication, which was in support of development, and this was a natural counterpart of the simplistic model of imitative economic development that was there in the 1960s. Yeah, that this was just simplistic. They thought that it could be transplanted from one environment, the Western environment, and then brought to the developing world, and that it would be successful. But it was seen that this simplistic approach was not showing any kind of success. And there was a slow but sure and conscious realization that development for every country has to be seen in terms of its own needs. Yeah, that the needs of one country are not necessarily the needs of the other countries. And they must be related to its unique circumstances, be it climatic, be it historic, be it social, be it cultural, so, and then it would succeed. So this decline in development, yeah, it created the opportunity for the process of debate, lively debate and discussions, and there was a conference that was that met under UNESCO, and this is a conference on the International Commission on Problems of Communication, which was headed by one Sean McBride. And the result of this rethinking and this debate is that there should be sensitivity to structural and cultural constraints on the impact of communication. Because when people are communicated to, it is not a must that they develop in the lines of the earlier theorists. So this is why this rethinking, this debate came or resulted in sensitivity to structural and cultural constraints. In 1975, there was a conference that was held in Honolulu, and this reviewed the use of communication in economic and social development. And through this conference, there was a turning point for the study of development communication. The way that development communication had always been thought of now had to change. There was a turning point. And two pioneers, Lana and Schramm, admitted that the model of trickle-down communication development would not be effective. That means that development trickling from the developed world to the developing world had proved to be ineffective, and other ways had to be developed. Let's look at what development journalism stands for. And this refers to the practice of journalism concerned with gathering, packaging, and disseminating development-oriented news and information, according to Adebayo. writing in 1990. Yeah. Development journalism, just like ordinary journalism, is about gathering, packaging, and disseminating news and information. The point of departure is that this information now should be development-oriented news. The term development journalism emerged around the mid-1960s, and this was a descriptive term for a type of journalism which demands that news reporting be constructive and should be geared toward development ends. And this concept of development was spearheaded by development journalism was spearheaded by developing countries because they felt that their interests were not being served by Western news agencies. And this concept came from scholars from developing countries who felt they wanted to cut the ties or the umbilical cord that had tied them to Western communication scholarship, since they had discovered that Western models of journalism related and journalism-related scholarship were not, in fact, transferable to developing countries. And this, we can see, is quite an advancement, because journalists and scholars from the developing countries realized that the development communication that was being handed down to them was not being very helpful, as we saw there earlier. And we want to look at tenets of development journalism. Tenets are what we refer to as principles. And these include the following: that media must accept and carry positive development tasks in line with nationally established policy, national policy, because every nation, like we saw, has their own development needs, and then established policies is what development journalists should look at. They must create, they must accept and carry out those development tasks that are established along the national policies. The other tenet is that freedom of the media should be open to economic priorities and the development needs of the society. Yes, that the media should be free and should be able to report on the economic priorities and what is the needs of the society that it is reporting about. And without freedom, without the media being free, this would be a challenge, because it will not be able to look at the priorities, and then to also not be able to look at the needs of that society. The other tenet is that media should give priority in their content to the national culture and languages. And this is very important, because when the content looks at the national culture and the languages, it becomes more understandable to the people. It becomes more acceptable. Instead of looking at other cultures or looking at other languages, when they look at the content, the national culture and languages, they are able to cover development communication in a better way. Another tenet is that the media should give priorities news and information to links with other developing countries that are closely geographically, culturally, or politically connected. Yeah, because instead of looking at other countries that are far, that are not connected, that are not close geographically, because geographically there are similarities. There are things that people can learn from one another. If we look at our country, Kenya, we have other countries in the region, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and those ones we are culturally, we're geographically close, and we have so many things in common and many things that we can learn from one another. The other tenet is that the media has a responsibility as well as freedoms in their information gathering and dissemination. That even as the media or communicators gather information, they have a responsibility. Yeah, they have a responsibility. They have to do that responsibly in a way that is going to be helpful to the communities that it is reporting about. And the other tenet is that in the interest of development aids, the state has a right to intervene. It can restrict. It can also intervene in the media operations. It can also apply devices of censorship. It can also subsidize and have a great direct control over whatever is being done by the media. And this can be justified because the interests of the country should be taken care of. Let's look at attributes or characteristics of development journalism. These are characterized by purposefulness, that development journalism is purposeful. It is also pragmatic. It should be relevant. It is mass-oriented. It has a scientific outlook. And it is technical subject matter oriented. It is participatory, and it's also process oriented. We could look at each of these attributes. So when we look at purposefulness, that development journalism is purposive, and it is also goal oriented. It has to look at fostering development in a country or a society. And the writer should consciously and purposely work towards objective improvement in the socio-economic conditions of the people. And the writer must realize that their writings must contribute to development. So it is purposefulness. Yeah, it is that purpose for development. The other attribute is pragmatism, that development journalism is pragmatic, is a pragmatic affair, and it is result-oriented, and it should strive to achieve targetable development goals. And the issues that are taken up should be related to the happenings in society, and they should enhance development. It's realistic, it's pragmatic, it's something that can be seen, it's something that can be produce results. The other one is the other characteristic is that development journalism should be relevant. It should have relevance. It should focus on the things that affect the people, the things that are relevant to the people. If it's a place that people are having problems with water, it should be relevant to that condition, that it seeks to improve the conditions of the people so that they can have access to water. If it's about food, the same. So the topics and issues that are reported by development journalism should be relevant to the audience, if it's agricultural, if it's industrial, if it is education, if it is health, if it's about welfare, if it's about community development, if it's about social welfare, and all the other ingredients of national life as they affect the lives of the people. It should be relevant. The other attribute is that it should be mass-oriented, that is basically targeting the masses, targeting the people, what generally benefits or concerns most people, especially the rural poor, because the rural poor are many and they have many challenges. Their needs and how they can be served is what development journalism should look at, because its orientation is mass. And the common problems in society is what it should seek to address, because these concern the majority of the citizens. Another attribute is that development journalism is process-oriented. It is not a one-off affair. It is a process. And it's not just one event. It's a question of many events together with actions, thoughts, and activities that have led to that build-up, to that process. And it should point at the events, the causes, the consequences, and the possible solutions of these problems, which is not like conventional news writing, which just focuses on an event. Maybe it's a crisis, maybe it's an accident, maybe it's an occurrence, but development journalism is process oriented. It's also scientific in outlook, because it's based on research and hard facts. It's not just about hunches, guesswork, feelings. It should look at the whole process through social science tools of research, surveys, sampling, interviewing, to be able to gather accurate and reliable data to guide development programs. Development journalism is also participatory. Yeah, that the development journalist should involve the people whom he or she is writing for, through interactions, through discussions, through planning, to be able to affectionately report about their situations and also be able to suggest solutions. And it's also important to involve the community members when sourcing news and information, because they have an important contribution to make. And it also has an added advantage of giving the community members a sense of belonging. They feel that what's being reported is about them and it's for them. And this is the end of our presentation for today. Thank you very much.